Hello everybody, I hope you guys are enjoying your day. Today we're going to be looking at a potential tropical storm which could move from the Pacific Ocean all the way into the Atlantic Basin, crossing over Mexico and potentially impacting parts of the mainland United States. So we'll be talking about that in today's video. And we also have another system off the sea in the Atlantic which was recently given a 50% chance of development. We'll quickly, briefly look at that, and then we'll go more in depth onto this potential tropical storm with a unique setup that could potentially bring it into parts of the United States in the Atlantic Basin. So here is the current National Weather Service page, and we do have some red flag warnings over parts of Nevada, Utah, and into northernmost Arizona, and then we have some excessive heat warnings over parts of the Southwest like you've had for the past couple of days. We also have a little area of flood watches in effect for parts of South and North Carolina, and then we have some wind advisories over parts of California and Oregon. But other than that, it is a quiet National Weather Service page day. So here is your current Atlantic system, which this isn't the one that's going to cross over Mexico, potentially impact parts of the U.S. This one, if it does move northward, which it does look like it will, it's mainly going to be very, very weak, and it could potentially impact parts of eastern Maine and into parts of easternmost Canada. So that is really the only threat. But even when it does impact, it's mainly just going to be rain, and it's not going to really bring any of those tropical storm force wind speeds. Right now, they have a 50% chance of it developing, but still, it's not going to be too big of a system, and probably is only going to strengthen to about a very weak tropical storm, and then it'll probably die down as it gets closer to the coastal areas, and you won't really see too much of an impact out of this one. Now, here's the Eastern Pacific tropical weather outlook, and they actually have a 70% chance of development of this system over the next 5 days. Now, their little cone of uncertainty area is west of Mexico, and it's still in the Pacific Basin. But what this could do, and what many models are indicating, the European and the GFS are both agreeing on this, at least crossing over Mexico. But then where it actually impacts with landfall, the GFS putting it as Texas. The European model wants to put it more to Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, potentially, and we have a bunch of other models that are going every which way. So we do still have a lot of uncertainty, and this would be happening within about a 10-day period. So it's going to be a very slow-moving system, but then it's really going to ramp up. It looks like this system could potentially move into the Atlantic, like we've been saying, but then where does it go? Does it go to the left into Texas, into eastern Mexico, or does it make a more eastward trek and then move into Florida, or does it kind of go just straight up the middle and move into parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama? So we'll have to see about that, and that's really something that we're going to have to try and figure out over the next couple of days. I don't have my personal graphic out for this one just yet because personally, I'm very uncertain. This could, as we really don't know, this could actually just stay in the Pacific Basin and really just sit there and not do anything. But it does look more likely it'll move into the Atlantic. Now, something I want to show you. This is for your Atlantic storm right now. Most of the models tracking it into easternmost Canada. And this would be a very, very weak system by the point it is impacting that area. Here is your model intensity guidance. A couple of these indicating a weak tropical storm. One of them wants to go for about 45 to 55 knot storm, but for most of them, keeping it below tropical storm status, so it's not going to be too big of an issue here. So also something I want to show you. Here are your ingredients for your tropical storm. We actually have some very, very warm sea surface temperatures right now, and these sea surface temperatures you really want above about 26 degrees Celsius. This is all in Celsius here, and that would indicate about 80 degrees or so Fahrenheit. And once you get above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when you really can start to see some development of these systems, and you see where your system is actually going to be developing, where if it were to cross into the Atlantic, this is the pool of water it would be impacting, and this is about anywhere from about 85 to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is very, very warm temperatures, definitely sufficient for some tropical storm force or some tropical storm development. And also for many of these areas that could potentially be impacted by this, look at the water surrounding them, except for around Florida, where you actually had those couple of tropical storms kind of cool down those waters. Everywhere else, you're very, very warm and you're above 80 degrees, and pretty much by the time this is developing and into the Atlantic, those waters off the coast of Florida are probably going to be above 80 degrees again, because you are looking to set up into a rather warm pattern over the next few days. So let's look at a couple of these models. Here's the GFS model for what it's showing, and this is your low pressure system off the shore of Mexico here, and you're gonna see it's really just gonna spin around right here, and the GFS just has it spinning around over the next couple of days, not really doing anything. This would be by Wednesday, still in the Pacific, but then as we continue, the low pressure transfers over into the Atlantic, and then the GFS wants to bring this into Texas. We'll have to see about that. It's been bringing it every which way, anywhere from Texas to Florida. So we have a lot of different options of where it could go. But really, the main thing that you want to pay attention to is that this model brings it over Mexico and into the Atlantic. Now let's look at what the European model is showing, and it's also bringing this from the Pacific into the Atlantic here, and you see it does move off into the Atlantic, and then you start to see by the end of this time period, it starts to bring into Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. So here's your GFS upper air map, and this is going to show you where your low and high pressures are. Your blue indicating your low pressures, and your high pressures indicating by this orange and these reds. So you see we have a low pressure system. It's really just circulating in the Pacific, and then it quickly transfers, and then it moves into Texas. Here's what the European model does in terms of the upper level disturbance, and it's very hard to pick out, but it is this little area in between this high pressure system that is your low pressure system that develops, and the European model has this much weaker, and it has your low pressure system making its way into Louisiana there. So here's another ingredient that we have to look at here, and this is going to be your wind shear. Now, because of the La Nina that we have set up, this really helps hinder the wind shear, but really, right now, we do have quite a bit of wind shear. As the system starts to develop throughout this area, watch for this area really to start weakening in the amount of wind shear that is present over this area. That's where your system is going to be developing. And basically, what wind shear is, if you don't know, it's winds changing with heights. So once this happens with hurricanes, usually you like to see very little wind shear because it helps keep the system organized. Once you get those winds overhead that are kind of moving every which way, and they're moving in different directions from where they are on the bottom, that really helps disorganize these systems, and that's when you really start to see very messy systems, and really sometimes they don't even develop because of how much wind shear there is. Right now there's a lot of wind shear over where it will be developing over the Gulf of Mexico. Where it is developing right now, south of Mexico, very little wind shear, and that's actually going to translate into parts of the Gulf of Mexico. You start to see it breaks down. Look at that same area that I highlighted before. By the time this is developing, which would be around June 6th to about June 9th, we really don't know the date just yet. These models have it going anywhere from about the 6th of June to about the 9th of June. You start to see some clearing, and that's when your wind shear is really not that intense. Once it's out of the oranges and the yellows and the reds, and it's back into the greens and the blues, that's where it's more favorable for your development. And then you see it weakens even more, and you see where your system really tracks through right around there. Now here's another model that we have to look at. This is your European ensemble model, and this is showing you the how many of those models, they have about 40 or so models. What percentage of those models are actually showing you this turning into a tropical depression? Now, the European ensemble model has about a 5 to about 30% chance of this turning into a tropical depression with 20 knot winds or greater, which I believe is about 34 miles per hour winds. And you see, it is a decent chance, and these models do like to raise these chances while they continue and while we get closer to this event. So expect these numbers to rise to maybe even about 45 to about 65 as we get later on. And you see it does move into parts of Texas and Louisiana. Now here's your chance of seeing tropical storm force wind speed, which is 34 knots, and you see that moves into parts of Louisiana and Texas, and you have about a 5 to about 15% chance of that developing. And again, those numbers are going to increase while we get closer to that event. Anyways, guys, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.